Welcome to the Core podcast. This one's a little bit special because it's just hosted by me. This collection of fantastic podcasts comes from a load of amazing, influential women in tech. I'm really excited to share this with you throughout October. I hope you enjoy. In this episode, I'm delighted to be joined from Jess, and Jess has come from us from Barracuda, who we work with very closely with Core to Cloud, and actually was the first vendor when I started in this industry that I was taught about. So Barracuda was one of my early ones. So Jess, really delighted for you to join us today. Anyone that's listening, could you just give a quick overview about yourself, your journey, how you've made it to the career that you're into today?
Yeah, sure. So Jessica Kingham, as you mentioned. So I'm the Director of Channel Alliances at Barracuda Networks. I have been here around 7 years at Barracuda, in the industry as a whole about 8. And I actually was recommended by a friend of mine to get into the industry. A girlfriend of mine who had been in the industry herself recommended for me to move over, and it's been pretty cool, to be fair. I've had a really great journey. I've definitely worked on a lot of different projects and things like that. So it's something that's been really exciting. So yeah, that was sort of how I jumped into the industry.
What was your background before? You said you jumped in. How was your role, pathway, university? How did you end up where you were?
Yeah, I started working from quite a young age, to be honest. I've always had jobs since I've left school. So I worked in a jewelry shop when I was in college. I worked there, but then I jumped out of that and I sort of stepped into sales, really. I was an insurance broker, and then I went into an estate agency role and was looking for sort of that next jump, really. So as mentioned, a friend recommended it and moved over from there. So sales related roles, I guess, and then moved over to the tech industry.
And what was the recommendation of your friend that made you think, oh, I might give tech a go? Because it's not normally something we pick to choose as an industry, I don't think.
She, I think the perception of IT industry, I mean, even when I talk to some of my friends now, a lot of people are like, oh, geeky IT people, and like there's definitely a tag alongside it. But she just explained to me sort of, where she was working, and she actually said about, they were doing all these wellness weeks, and it was a young and fun industry and that sort of thing. And it actually made me like change my perception on it and jump over and into it as well. And I think she just said how fast it was growing, and it was a good industry to be in. So I think, it was that she recommended, and I took the jump.
And interestingly, you took the jump. You didn't have any previous experience, I assume. So how did you tackle, I guess, the interview process, but also from then on? Because I know when I started, I came from a marketing background with no tech or cyber. So there was a little bit of, I guess, imposter syndrome, or not quite sure knowing. And there's a lot of jargon in this industry that I had absolutely that I had to do a lot of learning. So how did you, that transition period, how did you, I guess, get your stripes and get a good understanding of the industry?
I think it's mainly around research, right? Well, no matter what industry you go into, you're always going to have to learn new things. And so I think you just got to find the right industry that's right for you. For me, I jumped into tech and I actually found it really interesting. And I think doing the right sort of courses and enablement to train yourself up on the different areas definitely helps. I was very driven on making sure that I was always getting the right sort of grades. I was signing up to things that were basically, you didn't necessarily have to do it, but I went off and I did the learning, and I did the research, and just developed my skills really around technology. And I think that's what helped. I think no matter what industry you go into, as I mentioned, you have to learn new things. So it's just about putting the time and effort in to be able to do that.
Was there any particular resources or training things that you found particularly helpful, or would you recommend if someone was, were they free or were they helped through the company that you went to first?
So part of them were through the organisation that I worked through first. Yes. I think now, if you look at it, there's so many different books and Spotify and all the different sort of podcasts that you can read up on it. There's just so many different ways to educate yourself in different areas. At the time, it was very much sort of like e-training, like online skills that I had. But I think, everything's always changing, right? So I always try and learn new different things along the way. And, I'm really fortunate at Barracuda, we've got a campus and we've got tons of different platforms to train yourself up on our technology. But I think you need to sort of educate yourself on skills outside of that as well. So I tend to read different books and like look on podcasts just for general skills, not necessarily just to tech, but just general skills across the industry.
Yeah, because there's a lot of life skills and different things that you can take from different roles that still fit perfectly in this. I think I know from a lot of time, especially when I've been recruiting in the marketing team here, everyone has this preconception that you have to be so technical and understand everything. And I think that I don't even know if that's possible actually in our industry to can know everything or know every ransomware attack that's been released or know every, like I think it's just like you said, it's changing all the time. I think
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone, even a high expert, I know you have incredible experts at Barracuda, I don't even know if they would say that, oh, I'm an expert in every field of cybersecurity. I just think that's a bit of an impossible task, right?
To be able to do that.
Yeah,
Definitely. There's definitely the old timers that have been here a long time have got a lot more experience, I would say. But like you said, there's always new things coming out, right? So you always have to learn new stuff. So you can definitely be an expert in areas, but I think that's probably a key thing as well, is just finding where you do extremely well and then focusing on that area and becoming an expert in that area, because you'll spread yourself too thin if you try and learn everything, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And so when you moved, did you start? You started in a sales role, and now you're more in the channel position. How did that kind of progression happen, and what did you learn along the way, and where have you landed where you are now?
Yeah, so I started in end user roles, and I think that's really important because it helps you experience the customer journey. It helps you learn about the challenges they're facing. And from that, I sort of moved across. And when I first came to Barracuda, for instance, my role was split between end user and channel. And I guess I just developed along the way there. But I think when you step into the industry, it's definitely good to experience different types of roles, because I think if you always stay in one, you'll only ever know something from that perspective. So I think doing the end user role and obviously getting your hands in on the projects and things like that definitely help with that process. Yeah, and then moved across to the channel side of things, worked with tons of different types of resellers across the UK and Ireland, the national large ones and some smaller, value added resellers as well. So it's been great doing that. And more recently sort of moved over to the alliances side. So working with the likes of Microsoft and AWS and learning that side of the business as well.
Obviously, we're coming out of the whole COVID period, and now we're getting to see people. Did you have a period, obviously, because yours is a very personal role, isn't it? You're building relationships, you're spending time with people. Did it take an impact? Did you have to find different ways to communicate with your channel through that? Or did you have to do, I don't know, online meetups or different meetings? How did you keep the momentum and that conversation going over that period?
Yeah, it was definitely extremely different. And I think in a strange way, workload actually increased, because I think normally you'd go on site and you'd be with one reseller or one customer site for the whole day, and you'd spend that time with that partner. And by the end of it, I was doing 10 different Zoom meetings a day. So I think it was definitely a change in what the way that you approach things. But I think that's actually helped us take things from then to now to balance out that, what you're doing in person and what you're doing virtually. But yeah, we definitely had to get quirky with campaigns, and I think I did more cocktail workshops than I probably should have, to be honest. But definitely had to get creative with it. But it's just so important to keep in touch with everyone and keep front of mind, and obviously make sure that your conversations are relevant and stuff like that. So we had to be creative definitely during that period.
I get that. I think I became a very good gin expert and all the different information on tonics than I ever expected to during that time. So I'm with you with that one. Obviously the landscape is always changing in this industry, which I think makes it quite exciting. If you were speaking to, hopefully there's women listening to us right now, or anyone hoping to get into the industry, why do you think it's really appealing? And do you see any, I don't know, common trends or things that you think that's happening over the next 5 years that you think, or even more so, you'd probably want to get into this industry now? Because I think, I think it's changing a lot from the marketing and things like that. But are you seeing things that you're thinking, if I was looking for a role, I'd still go this direction?
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, do you mean specifically to women or just in general?
Both, in general. I mean, obviously, with the campaign is very specific of trying to get more women in tech, but I also think getting more people involved in cybersecurity. We know there's a skill shortage across the board for this. So ideally, definitely getting more women, because that helps with that, but also anyone, I guess, listening.
Yeah, it's such a rapidly growing industry, and the topics are always evolving and changing. I mean, if you look at cybersecurity as a whole, hackers are always getting more sophisticated, and they're definitely moving to the trends and taking advantage of so many different things that we're experiencing. Obviously, like the pandemic, for instance, created a whole new load of different types of threats. It brought back old threats as well. So it's just a constantly evolving industry. And you even just mentioned yourself, right? There's definitely a skill shortage. I think obviously, getting more women in the industry would definitely help boost that and fill that gap between the men and the women in the industry. But it's definitely an exciting time to be here. And I think technology is definitely such a big part of all of our lives now as well. So being able to obviously have the right security in place, it's a great industry to be in, because, I'm always learning new things day in, day out. And I've been at Barracuda 7 years now. So it's just somewhere that's just really exciting. And on top of that, there's just really great people in the industry as well. It's fun. So it's definitely something I would say to get into.
That's interesting, because earlier when we said, building our career, and when you consider tech or cyber, you do have a preconception that it's a bit geeky. I also played this gender game a while back, and someone said, think of a nurse, and most of us will think of a woman. Or you think of a CEO of a business, most of us will think of a man. It was quite an interesting gender game. And actually, at my daughter's primary school, the cards that she brought home the other day with job roles were actually very mixed. So it was quite nice to see that. But getting back to my point, when you started 7 years ago, did you find that it was more male dominated? I know for me, I did. Like I think there was women definitely in HR and marketing, but there definitely wasn't in the other field. Did you find that? And did you find that, you're quite a male dominated area of people?
Yeah, so definitely when I started, if I look at, we were in a different office then and we were a lot smaller, but I was one of few women, and it was definitely obviously male dominated. If I look at where we are now, the women probably in the UK team outweigh the men, which is pretty cool.
Interesting.
Which is really nice.
That's really cool.
We did have quite a lot of women in the tech team, but we definitely need to improve on that in terms of like pre-sales and engineers and things like that. But definitely across the sales floor, there's a lot more women, which is pretty cool. I was really lucky actually, because I remember in my first year, we actually had the leadership team come over from the US, and we actually had a female in the leadership team. And I remember her getting up and doing a presentation, and I just thought that's awesome, because you never really see that. So I was quite lucky from an early stage. I think I had someone to look up to that was a woman, and and she was super cool and she was great. And so I was quite fortunate that I had that. But there was definitely less then than there is now, I think.
I think a role model is such an important part of this. On previous podcasts, I've been talking about this topic. People have said, normally when you're making a decision of your career, it's probably someone that you've either seen on a stage, or maybe cooking a football, or you've seen them play tennis. There's someone that's inspired you and drives you with that. And interestingly, there hasn't been that many strong, maybe powerful women within the tech industry to look at. Even if you kind of think of the well-known obvious brands of technology like Steve Jobs or, that sort of thing. There hasn't been that. Do you think having those strong women and leadership, and obviously it had an impact on you very early of seeing a woman doing very well in the industry, do you think having mentors or access to mentors or seeing them in lights is really important?
Yeah, super important. I think you definitely have to surround yourself, I think, generally with like-minded people, for sure. But I think a lot of the time people are actually quite scared to reach out to senior people and ask for mentorship. I think at the time we didn't have a mentorship program. We do now, which is great. But I reached out. It was actually a senior male guy that I just, I thought he was quite inspirational. I loved his presentations, and I actually reached out to him and asked him if he could be my mentor. I would have asked Nicole, who was the woman that I mentioned, but she was over in the US. So I reached out to someone who was close by that I could lean on quite a lot. And that definitely really, really helped me along my journey, I think, because from both a personal and work perspective, it definitely helped me grow in areas where I thought probably wasn't possible, and help with my soft skills as well as my tech skills as well, which is cool. So I think having a mentor is super important.
And I think totally right with this, that it doesn't have to necessarily be the same gender, because I think what we're learning with having a 50-50 split in our team is that everyone has complementary skills, that you need both in the room to have that development. Like, I think, you can have all men and you could have all women, but you all kind of bring very similar skill sets. I always like to think the women on the team may be a little bit more patient and a bit more may have a bit more empathy in the room, and maybe aren't as assertive, maybe are slightly less risk averse. I don't know. I'm probably generalizing, but some of these things allow if you have that in the room. So I think having a male mentor is, I've definitely learned getting into a more leadership role within the team, is that I needed some of those male strengths as well. Like I needed a bit of balance, because if I was always risk averse, we'd never get anywhere. So
definitely.
do you think having a male mentor actually supported along the way, and there was things that you picked up from him that you thought, oh, okay, I've brought that out of my character a bit?
Yeah, definitely. I think because definitely when you first start as well, I think as a woman you probably doubt yourself quite a lot. Like you mentioned, you get worried to take risks. I think there was a ton of times when I would sit in a meeting and I would think, I would say that, and then I would panic and wouldn't say it, and then someone else said at the table, and then you're just, I don't know. And I think that happens a lot. I see it with some of the women in the team and girls that come into the team early on as well. You see sort of similar patterns. And I think definitely, I mean, I was really lucky with the leadership around me. I had that mentor, I had great managers, and a lot of them always said to, like, stand your ground, put your point forward, this. And I think that definitely helps build confidence. And a woman could have told me that as well, but it was just men that I had that with. But I think, definitely helping you get your standpoint and obviously develop confidence is something they helped me achieve as well. So I think it does help.
Because there's some really sad stats actually from women that our confidence massively drops between 28 and 32. And it has a big dip. I'm sure there's a number of reasons of that, whether it's children or marriage or relationships or things that happen in our life period. But we start having a massive confidence dip at 28, and it apparently slowly gets worse unless you have some sort of promotion or something that keeps you going up in confidence. So I read that recently. That was quite sad. But also this morning I was listening to a podcast, and actually they think that women may be a little bit not good at standing up for ourselves or saying for ourselves because of our, they say it could be back to the fact of like dating, and the fact that the guy is the one that asks you to the prom, or the guy that asks you to the date, and actually the women never are the ones that put yourself out. So by the time you get to a job role, you've not actually ever had to put yourself out there and get rejected. But if you've been a 14-year-old boy, you may have done that about 12 times until a girl said, yeah, I'll go for a date. So I thought it was quite an interesting concept, that actually maybe how roles are played in life during up until that point, that we don't put ourselves forward for that. How do you think, because obviously you stayed in a male-dominated industry, you've been obviously in a fantastic company, and you've had really good mentors. Do you think there are other things that as women we could do to get our confidence up a little bit? And do you think that could be, I don't know, education or having, like you've suggested, a mentor, but do you think there's any other things that maybe we could do? Because I know we're rubbish at applying for jobs as well, or putting ourselves forward to something that maybe we don't know 100% how to do. So do you think there's anything that we could do to be a little bit less risk averse?
Probably the other problem we've got is, if we're honest, women are perfectionists as well. So I think a lot of the time we worry about, whether we'll do it right, like you said, and we probably don't put ourselves to think forward for things because, we may not have full experience of what it takes to do that role. But generally, I would say, especially early on, I always put myself forward for things that were out of my job role. And I think that helps you build confidence because you learn. And I think the thing is as well, a lot of the time when you're new and you're learning new things, if you're showing that you've got, the ability to try and learn, people don't really care if you muck it up a few times, I mean, definitely in my experience anyway. So I think putting yourself out of your comfort zone, I think even in your current role, and just trying to experience new things, reaching out to different people and learning about different areas. And I always try to take on different projects, for instance, that weren't really in my role, which I actually think really helps, because I think you learn new things and you build new confidence in different areas, which helps it in the long run, really. So I think stuff like that and just coming out of your comfort zone definitely helps with that.
Yeah, I think that you said, like, being able, I think the perfection thing is so right. I think we just don't we think if we're going to take something on that we're going to absolutely nail it. But I think what I've learned, and I don't know, maybe we don't say this enough, that actually probably the things I've learnt the most from are the mistakes that I've made. That I've gone, okay, I won't do that again. Whereas if you do something well or okay, that's great, but you're just repeating a pattern of itself that you're validating what you already know. So it is really scary, and you don't get really I don't think you get really taught that much at school, that it's okay to make it. I think because of the grading system, it's like you hit a grade, but I don't think you're allowed to get a bit messy at school. It's very black and white. Do you think from a younger age there's something more that we can do with getting people into tech and even into cyber. I mean, I bought my daughter a brilliant book that was written by a lady called Amber on LinkedIn. She's an American and she's a sales, and she did a really great book about cybersecurity to explain it for a child. And she loves it and she's really enjoying it. And even I learned some bits that were much more simplified than I was like, oh, actually, that makes more sense. So I just wonder whether you think there's something that could be done there, or even if it's just a low touch, because really all of us are involved in technology. It's around us all the time. My daughter does a lot of learning on an iPad now. So do you think there's things that we could do earlier on to make this a little bit more of an appealing career?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a long time since I've been at school.
Same.
I definitely didn't have a lot of visibility into different industries. I think it was very black and white of the standard job types that we had visibility into. So I think it's definitely improved, because I mean, I speak to, my nieces, for instance, who are in school, and they talk about the different industries you can get into. And I think they're helping expand on that for sure, just as a whole, obviously outside of tech. But I also think, and it links back to what you said earlier, really, because a lot of the time I wasn't great in school. I didn't get, I wasn't an A-star student. I definitely had to work a bit harder to try and learn. And I think sometimes that's also what knocks things, because I think, like you said, it is so set, right? It's maths, English, science. We don't really have skills outside of that we look at. So you sort of think, oh, well, I won't be able to do that because I'm not good at maths, or, I was never really good in science, or, in IT, I didn't really do very well. And I think that knocks you. But I think a lot of the time, if you have, if you're prepared to learn, and obviously you have a strong character, and you wanted to go out there and try new things, you just have to take a jump for it. And I think we need to inspire younger people to be able to do that, because it's definitely, like you said, it's a very strict system in school, isn't it? So I think if you feel like you're not, an A-star student, then you can't necessarily apply for these type of roles, which is not true, effectively.
No. Okay, so we think education's a really good way of getting us more into it. We think mentors help us along the way, always assuming that you don't know anything, because if we keep taking risks and having a go, and education's really good, that's going to really help us get onto this path and things like that. Do you think there's anything more? So obviously we're women in our careers. There's always progression. There's a statistic that we are doing better in the FTSE companies, that are more women on boards and on more senior roles, but it's still quite low in the tech industry. Do you think there's more things that we could be doing as both women in the industry, of how we could empower ourselves to go up? Or do you think, do you think there's more things that could be done to give us that confidence to take those promotional roles?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a top-down approach, right? That needs to be an element of it. Companies need to be ensuring that they're promoting the right culture to inspire younger women to obviously want to grow and learn in the industry. I think another thing as well, what's super important is, when, as a woman, and it is sad that we have to look into this, but I think we definitely need to sort of research whether the company is a right fit for you as well. I think when you're in that early stage of coming into the industry, a lot of the time, because we do lack in confidence, we don't tend to challenge the company of what's your culture like? Does that fit me? A lot of the time it's, well, what can I do for you? And, do I fit your company? But actually, I think you need to reverse it the other way around. And I think you need to look at whether a company is the right fit for you, because ultimately, if they're not going to promote them types of things, like obviously career progression for women, and, that gender pay gap, and removing that, and obviously ensuring that you're valued for your skills, really, then you don't want to go for that company. So I think that's something that the women need to do when looking into a company, to flip it in the reverse, I think.
I think that's interesting for anyone, really, when you're interviewing. I don't know about you, but when I left uni, I was so desperate for someone to hire me. I was just so nervous with all of it that I never really ever considered whether that company was a good fit for me. I was just I've got an interview, I've just got to put my best self on. I probably should have asked, especially some of the early day companies that I worked for, should have asked more questions of things, because I mean, there's some fantastic companies around with fantastic cultures and around us, and especially in the tech industry. But I think that kind of initial period of when you're interviewing and trying to find your first few roles, I think we don't ask enough questions of the employee.
And I learned that the hard way, if I'm 100% honest. Because I think I for me, my experience of tech industry is it's amazing. But I did have hiccups along the way. For instance, I jumped into a company where someone mentioned it was a good company. And I didn't actually look whether that fit was right for me. And I was there for a short time and I stepped away from that. And that actually knocked my confidence a bit because I thought, oh, I'm not very good at this. I don't, maybe it's not the right industry for me.
Yeah.
And then I went to a company and obviously moved to Barracuda where it was a great fit for me. And, you know, and I
Flourished.
couldn't get enough of working. Yeah, you know, I loved it. So I think I learned that the hard way. But that's definitely something that I say to my sister and my nieces and stuff, you know, when you're looking at that stuff, you need to look at if it's the right company for you.
There's a lot of cultural things that you need to check. I know we're in the process of we've got a beautiful office and we're refitting it in October. We're in a castle, so I'm very privileged. But one of the things when we were doing the refit was I wanted a private room, like a wellness room, but for a number of reasons. That it was for prayer for people with different religions, but I've got 2 young children, but it was somewhere to be able to express. Because normally you just go to the toilet, and I have to admit it's just like the worst. It's just like a bathroom. You're using the bathroom up, like it's just not like and because we had the opportunity of really taking the building and making it a bit of our own, I was a bit like, I'm not the only woman right now that's got 2 young kids, but hopefully we're going to get more women in the team, and you know they may have children and things like that. It would be lovely to have somewhere where they could sit and it's comfortable and it's private and they could put some music on and they just feel like they're not, I don't know, like in the way. You can feel a bit like, oh, sorry, I've just got to use this toilet and I'll probably be about 20 minutes. So yeah, that was just one thing that I was really passionate about. Like, and that I hopefully will be a HR thing for someone on a recruitment or a thing. They'll be like, oh, actually that place has got a really, you know, aspirationally want to have children. That would be great for me. It's all those things, isn't it? I think, and I don't even think it's a male. I think just people just don't think. I don't even think it's like I think it's just got to happen to them to be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, that would be a really good idea. I don't even think it's like a male thing or people not being considerate. I just think they forget. Maybe.
I mean, you spend a third of your life working, right? You need to make sure that it's a good environment to be in, and that you obviously have spaces where you feel comfortable and stuff like that. So, but I think you're right as well. It's until you sort of raise it, sometimes companies don't think about it. So it's important that you sort of feed that back, I guess, which obviously you've done, and it's worked out really well. So generally, most people need to probably voice their opinions a bit more, I think.
Yeah, I think that's anything for male and female. If you've got something that you're passionate about or want to add into the mix, I think someone will listen to you. It might not happen straight away, but hopefully you'll have some influence or you'll put like a little spark in someone's mind. If you were, obviously you've talked about your nieces and they decide to you, actually, I want to follow in your path, I want to get into tech. What would you be your best advice right now to start looking into a career, and where would you start them and give them some advice for that?
Yeah, so definitely looking at sort of the type of role that you want to do is super important, because again, you can apply to the wrong type of role and it may knock your confidence. You want to do something that you think's right for your set of skills you have at that time. And I think obviously developing, I mentioned earlier about soft skills, right? So working on your soft skills, because I think if you develop the ability to be able to talk, you know, in public situations, to be able to deliver presentations, to be able to deliver business ideas, or even, you know, going back to things of voicing your opinion of how you want to change the offices to make better workspace. I think if you have confidence in being able to talk about them types of things, that helps you in your career as well from loads of different aspects, right? When you look at soft skills, I think we always focus on things that are important, like looking at sort of technology and understanding the risks and the different types of security and whatever area you may want to be an expert in. But I think a lot of the time we lack focusing on your soft skills and how you can actually communicate with people. So I think that's a really big thing, because if you develop that, generally you can learn skills elsewhere. You know, you can learn about cyber security, you can learn about ransomware. But if you focus on your soft skills first, from there you then grow onwards, I think. So that's definitely something I would say, because it's not something that a lot of people give advice on, I don't think.
And the other thing that I just wanted to reach back on, you said that you picked the wrong role or the wrong company with the culture, and it had a bit of an impact on your confidence. How did you rebuild yourself back up to reapply or step back into the industry?
Yeah, so I actually, funnily enough, it's actually a reseller who reached out to me and said, I know a company that are looking for someone, I'm going to put you forward. And I went to the interview, and that was the first time I actually twisted it back. And it was Chris Ross, actually. So he's now our CRO. And he was basically interviewing me. He's super relaxed. He actually asked me about my family. He asked me about my journey and what I've done, and really personable things, I think. And that actually threw me, because I thought, oh, he actually really cares about my well-being outside of work. He wasn't asking me, what what are your weaknesses and stuff like that, like just the standard interview questions. He was really trying to connect with me on a personal level, and I think that was really important. And that's the first time I thought, actually, yeah, you need to figure out if they're the right fit for you. So I think that's what definitely helped. I think obviously stepping back into it, you definitely need to rebuild your confidence. But I think when you've got the right support network around you, that definitely helps as well. So just making sure basically you're picking the right company and you have the right people within the company that you work with. Yeah, I think it definitely helped.
No, that completely makes sense to me. So, I just wondered if you had any other final kind of lasting tips. Obviously, I appreciate you've given us a good chunk of your time today. And then, a little, any kind of extra tips. And then also you work for Barracuda. You obviously believe in the company and the culture. Anything you would recommend if someone wanted to find out about Barracuda or wanted to maybe even get a role with you guys, where you'd say the best place to look?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, always feel free to reach out to anyone at Barracuda. We're a super friendly team, so always happy to discuss roles and opportunities that we have. We've got a ton of different areas that you can work on, from sales, tech, channel, whatever it may be, or IT support. We've got really great roles, but definitely reach out to anyone in the team. We're always happy to set people up, and we've had, for instance, cleaners reach out to us and start in the initial roles that have now developed into team leaders.
I love that.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah, so we've had, we're always open. If we see, and this is, I mean, I've touched on it a few times, but if we see someone that's willing to put the shift in and do the work, then you can get into any type of role. And he's a team leader now as well. So I think definitely take the jump, because you won't ever be able to do it if you don't, but reach out to the team and obviously see what roles we have available, because we're always keen to take on eager people, for sure.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jessica. I really appreciate your time and your insight and your thoughts. And obviously, we love working with Barracuda, and you're a lovely culture. And it's obviously a good show that you've been there for 7 years. So you haven't moved around. So that's a really positive. So thank you very much for being part of the campaign. And I hope everyone enjoyed listening.